Hello and welcome to the Oregon Business Matters podcast, brought to you by Oregon Business and Industry, Oregon's statewide Chamber of Commerce, where we focus on insights, issues, and initiatives that impact Oregonians' shared prosperity and the state's economic health. I'm Angela Wilhelms, President and CEO of OBI, and your host today. Today, I'll be talking to two of the highest-ranking Democrats in the Oregon Legislature. They are Senate Majority Leader Kayse Jama and House Majority Leader Ben Bowman. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you, Angela, for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We're excited.
Yeah, so am I. Senator Jama represents District 24, which includes East Portland and North Clackamas County. He was appointed to the Senate in 2021 and then elected to the position in 2022 and was named Senate Majority Leader last fall in November. Representative Bowman represents District 25, which includes Tigard and parts of Durham and Beaverton. He was elected to the House in 2022 and re-elected in 24. And Representative Bowman was named House Majority Leader in March of 2024. So again, thank you both for taking time to talk today.
Any chance to join a podcast, I try to say yes.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. All right, well, let's get to it. So first, I would love to start with sort of the basic intro question I think a lot of elected officials get asked, which is, why did you want to run for office? What drew you to step up to get appointed? We'll start with you, Senator.
Thank you so much, Angela. I think for me was really the issues that deeply affected in my community. I was at the time an executive director of a small nonprofit agency, and really realizing that a lot of the issues that I care deeply most has not been addressed by the legislators, and we came to advocate quite some time. And at this moment, I just decided to, rather than asking the question of, like, can you help us, why not run for the seat and, and be elected to the position. So I decided to run, and mainly around housing issues. That's what really drove me to run for the office, by wanting to address some of the housing crisis that our state is facing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Certainly an issue worth serving over. Mm-hmm. Representative?
Yeah, for me, it's my professional background was in education and state legislative politics. So your listeners will probably remember Congresswoman Val Hoyle. When she served in the legislature, I worked in her office starting as an intern. And then I worked for Representative Doherty, who preceded me in representing Tigard in the legislature. And so after I finished working for them, I ended up getting elected to the local school board. And when the seat opened up, I decided to jump at it and give it a shot.
Great. Well, both of you, fairly early in your legislative careers, then found yourselves in these leadership positions. These are big roles, a lot of additional responsibility and time. A lot of people might not know, though, what goes into being a caucus leader. So in your own words, how would you describe your respective roles as majority leader to our listeners?
It's probably somewhat similar to your job in that you have a very diverse coalition, each with sort of different specific interests, background, experiences. And I think of the job as kind of like team captain. We are also players on the team. We have our own bills, ideas, goals, but we also have the responsibility to keep the whole team together and align towards a common vision. So we each identify as caucuses our caucus agenda for that session. Ours centers on affordability, public safety, making government work, and we try to keep, with all the ups and downs of sessions, people's bills dying, conflict happening, we try to keep the team rowing in the same direction as best we can in the session. Senator Jama, how would you add to that?
No, I totally agree with that. I think also I will describe as being a facilitator and really trying to help the caucus, as Representative Bowman said, that having working on the common agenda and common goals, but you're facilitating a dialogue and the conversation and really guiding the issues that the caucus cares most, to make sure that they're aligned with the priorities that we set up for our caucuses. So really the position is just being a facilitator and trying to guide the conversation rather than being a decision maker.
Yeah, as somebody who staffed leadership offices for a little while, I think those are both really good descriptions.
Yeah,
it's a lot of both of those things. So I guess some things in the process don't change.
Yeah, that's right.
So what, as you stepped into either your legislative role generally or specifically your majority leader role, What has surprised you the most, and what have you enjoyed the most? Sort of a two-part question.
I think for me, what surprised me most is that it's how collaborative things are within our own caucus, but also within the other folks on the other side of the aisle. Really, the collaboration is real, and so working together, that's really what most surprised me, how much collaboration there is. What was the other part of the question?
And what have you enjoyed the most?
I think one of what I enjoy most is that I'm relationship oriented. So really having people sit down one-on-one and talking to them about their issues that they care most, and just also trying to guide, understanding that you're guiding Oregonians for a better place in terms of the policy decisions that we're making collectively together. So having that sense of making sure we're taking care of all Oregonian needs is really also what makes me excited about the role.
Yeah, that's great.
I would totally agree with both of those. I think what has surprised me most, I was actually talking to Congresswoman Hoyle a few days ago and told her I had a newfound appreciation for her service in the role that I didn't even see when I worked for her, which is how big of a volume of what we do is not about policy. It's about interpersonal dynamics. It's about people navigating tragedy in their own lives. It's about members who are dealing with professional challenges. Like, people sometimes forget that the legislators in Salem are real people who are navigating their own crises and dynamics just like everybody else. And a lot of that falls to our offices to help and support them through. So that has been surprising. And I think my answer on the thing I enjoy most is also the relationships. This is a very relationship-heavy job, both among legislators, but also among folks who work in the building, lobbyists, staff members, media. You're sort of the center point of a lot of relationships for the caucus. So I feel very fortunate I get to play that role too.
Yeah, that's great. So let's pivot a little bit from the roles and kind of that high level talk to the session itself. We are nearing the end of session. And what have you been most proud of this session? What are you, when you reflect back, what are you really grateful for that maybe was an accomplishment policy-wise or not? And then what do you hope to get accomplished as the session comes to a close at the end of June?
Great questions. It does feel, we started this session with, I think, a record number of bills in the Oregon Legislature, and we now have winnowed those down to a much more manageable number. But there's still definitely, every bill has to make its way through the process. So for me, again, I mentioned the caucus agenda and my responsibility in trying to shepherd the priorities of the caucus. We start with affordability. It's the number one issue on the minds of voters, and probably a lot of your members as well in their roles as business owners. So focusing on affordability is a key for us, and we've advanced legislation on utility affordability, healthcare affordability, housing affordability. So getting those over the finish line will be really important. In terms of things that are already done that I'm really proud of, we passed a piece of legislation to help finance our Medicaid program in this state. Oregon does an incredibly good job of administering Medicaid. We have one of the highest health insurance coverage rates in the entire country, and it's because we leverage our resources so effectively. We passed that piece of legislation on a bipartisan basis off of both houses of the legislature, and it was a big win for Oregonians.
Great.
Thank you. I think I echo that sentiment also as well. I think, this session started with the challenges around, and unknown factors around what's happening with the chaos that's happening in the federal government. So there's a lot of unknowns in terms of how to proceed. But we also had an agenda, and to make sure that our agenda goes forward. And those include affordability, whether it's housing, whether it's healthcare. I do agree, Representative Bowman, that one of the most proudest things that we have done is that passing HB 2010, which provides 1.4 million Oregonians providing healthcare for. So that's really, for me, that's where the rubber hits the road. Those kind of examples. We also did quite significant work around housing issues, and as former chair of the housing housing crisis real issues, and we need to make sure that we have more production in the housing arena. And we recently passed the Senate floor Senate Bill 974, which increases housing production and removes red tapes around local jurisdictions. So I think for me, those are some accomplishments. Of course, we also did the baseball bill 110, which was close to aisle bipartisan issue, and it was really excited to see that bill move to the House side of it. And now it's Representative Bowman's problem.
We are happy to have it.
Is it a problem or an opportunity?
It's opportunity. I think you're right. You're right. It's opportunity. What's left to finish? I think for me the biggest thing is to finish this two things. One is we'll make sure that we balance the budget.
Mm-hmm.
We're required by law, by constitution, to have balanced budget. So that's one thing that we need to do. The second thing is that we need to make sure that we pass transportation infrastructure bill that we're hoping to finish this session to take that issue. So I think that's for me. If we take those two issues out of this session, that will be a really successful session. I will imagine.
Yeah, both of you in that talked about affordability. I think we all know, just anecdotally, and from what you hear from constituents, from what I hear from members, cost of living, the cost of operating a business, cost in general has really become a top of mind issue for Oregonians. And you mentioned a couple things that you're working on in that space. But what else can the legislature do to help address rising costs and the affordability issue, not just for individuals and families, but also for businesses?
It's a really good question. I don't know, have you been reading or listening to Ezra Klein talking about abundance at all?
I have.
So I'm drawn to that analysis. Like the law of supply and demand says when you have more supply, the cost goes down. So when Ezra Klein talks about it, he talks about the supply of housing. The amount of supply we have is what drives the cost. I think you can also draw parallels to healthcare. We have a significant physician shortage in this state. You could say the same thing for energy. When you have more clean energy, the cost of clean energy goes down. So I do think we are in a place in Oregon where we need to focus on making more of the things that we need. And I think that ultimately is key to driving costs down. And we have several proposals that will advance work on that. By no means will solve these problems. These are decades-long problems that have been created, and we need to be really intentional about addressing them. And I should shout out the governor for her leadership on housing. I will also say, I try to avoid being unnecessarily partisan, but the federal government's role in affordability right now is hard to ignore. The tariffs that I know are impacting your businesses that you represent are also driving up costs for working families. And so that's something that is outside of our control, but absolutely impacts the work that we do in the legislature and will likely decrease the amount of revenue that we collect as businesses are seeing a reduction in their volume of business. So that's a little bit of how I'm thinking about it and what is concerning me that I don't think is within our control.
I think that's really important question in terms of the issues of you raised around affordability and in both community members, Oregonians, as well as our business community. So I do agree with you, Representative Bowman, that when we really address housing issues, when we have affordable housing, when we have workforce housing development, that benefits the employers and will allow them, the Oregonians, to be more successful both in business side and also having housing arena as well. In terms of the healthcare, similar scenario, it plays out. Transportation infrastructure that I mentioned earlier is a big economic factor. If we pass the transportation package this session, will allow our business to be successful, and it will be will drive the economy more. But I do agree also that it's very difficult to avoid and not talk about the tariffs that the administration has put in forward, which is impacting Oregon businesses as well.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Since you touched on partisan stuff, I'm gonna ask a question, but it's a pretty light touch on the partisan situation that happens in the legislature. and it's not really about policy. Democrats have been in the majority in both chambers for some time now, and I think most would agree that it's certainly probably better to be in the majority than the minority.
Certainly my preference.
Yeah, sure. But I'm sure that leading in the majority comes with its own set of challenges alongside the opportunity that comes with majority stake of the legislature. So I don't think that's something people give a lot of attention to. So I'd love to hear from our two majority leaders, what do you think those challenges are that you face that people might not realize?
It's a good question. I mean, ultimately, you have the responsibility to govern. And I think we, on both sides of the legislature, in the Senate and the House, I think we, especially this session, are trying to do that in a collaborative way. You're not seeing very many party line votes. I think we're well over 90% of the votes taken so far this session have been bipartisan, which I think speaks to the type of, most of the legislation that we pass in this state are not controversial topics. They're not things that are divisive. This is a very different dynamic than people see at the federal level. I think that surprises a lot of people. They are surprised by the volume of bills we're passing compared to the federal government, where they're passing like a dozen bills or something in a legislative session, and that so much of what we do is bipartisan. There are certainly some issues that are not, but in general, that's a small minority of what we do. But in terms of being, in the majority leader position and having the, House Majority Office, I think it's just the responsibility of landing the plane. Again, you want help and support from your colleagues on the other side, and I've been grateful so far to the partnership that we've seen. But ultimately, it's on us to, as Senator Jama said, balance the budget, to pass legislation that's going to make people's lives better. And if that doesn't happen, that's on us. It's a shared responsibility, but we are elected to the majority. So I think that's kind of how I think about it.
I think that's really important question also as well, and I will take a different route. I think for me, some of the challenges that we're facing, first of all, that we have over 3,000 bills being introduced this session, and that comes with policy bills that also has a physical impact on the state, and there's a lot of great ideas. So how do you decide what to move forward and what to fund and what to not to fund? It's challenging in terms of that. So I think for me, that's really what the most difficult portion of the job is, that really having balanced approach in terms of like what ideas that takes the stage and ideas that's well cooked and ready to be moved. But ultimately, we have limited resources. So that balancing act is really, really difficult one to deal with it.
Yeah, that's probably an understatement that it's difficult to deal with. It is very challenging.
Yeah.
I want to switch gears again, and as we come to a close, but I want to get this in because you both talked about why you ran for office and what drew you to serve. What's a piece of advice you would give to somebody out there listening to this who's considering running for office themselves? What would you want to share with them as they go through that thought process?
It's a great question.
I think for me, this work, as Representative Bowman said, that it's all about relationships. So there's one advice that I will give somebody is that be mindful how you work with people, and just really know that relationships can be built for a long time and it can be destroyed in a matter of minutes. So be mindful how you approach people. I think that's really my advice. Like continue to try to build relationships with people and being relationship oriented. That's the best advice. And also be mindful about your family. I think family has really difficulty dealing with us as legislators, and we go away from home for many weeks and hours and days, and so knowing that balance, having a balance between family needs and also legislative work is important. And also last thing I'm going to say is about also staff matters, and the Albro staff matters, and people who work in this building matters, and lobbyists matters. So how do you make sure that you include and create an inclusive process? That really is the most important way that you can be successful as a leader.
That's all really, really good advice. I would double underscore the relationships comment, because I do think another thing that would surprise people is there are Republican legislators who pass a lot more bills than some Democratic legislators, and vice versa. And a lot of that has to do with relationships and the ability to disagree with someone on one issue, but know that you're going to need them on the next one. So I think that's really important. In terms of running itself, I would say if you are interested, for example, in running for the legislature, having some exposure to the legislature before you do that is really helpful. So you can understand how this process works. You can sort of set your expectations on what you'll be able to get done in a term, because I think it is more challenging than some people expect when they get here to pass laws and to win budget investments. So if you want to run for the council, show up to some city council meetings first. But I think my main piece of advice would be you should do it. You should run. We need people to step up and run for office, especially right now when trust in government at all levels, state, federal, local, is lower than it's been in a long time. That's not a healthy thing for a democracy. And the best way to change that trend is for people to raise their hands and to step up and serve in government.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. So we're going to bring it home here. We promised our listeners a relatively short form podcast, although I continue to go over our intended time every time because my guests are so interesting, yourselves included. But before we close, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
I think one thing that I will share with that, Oregon, it's a great place to live and make a family. So I'm really grateful to be part of this community.
Yeah, I think I would just say, to the extent that your listeners are business owners, thank you for what you do for Oregon. We really appreciate it in the legislature. I know it's not an easy job to be a business owner, but it makes our state great, and we appreciate everything that they're doing.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you both. We appreciate your willingness to serve and your willingness to serve in this extra capacity as a caucus leader. It is a often thankless job, so thank you for doing that. And that is all the time we have today. So once again, Senator Jama, Representative Bowman, thank you for joining us today. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. The Oregon Business Matters podcast is a production of Oregon Business and Industry, your statewide chamber of commerce. And episodes can be found on all of the top podcast platforms, including Spotify and Apple. You can also visit OregonBusinessIndustry.com for more information.